Jack was halfway through sipping his ice-cold lemonade, basking in the success of his brand-new backyard oasis, when the sound of aggressive knocking shattered the tranquility. He sighed, already knowing who it was. Only one person in the neighborhood knocked like they were serving a warrant: Karen, the self-appointed dictator of the HOA. Opening the door, Jack barely had time to register Karen's fuming expression before she shoved a clipboard toward his face. "We need to talk about the pool," she declared, her voice dripping with the kind of entitlement only a true HOA tyrant could muster. Jack took a long, slow sip of his lemonade, savoring the moment. "What about it?" he finally asked. Karen huffed, stepping forward like she owned the property. "The HOA has decided that your pool should be accessible to the entire community," she announced, as if she were delivering some royal decree. "It raises property values, and it's unfair for you to keep such a luxury to yourself when it benefits all of us." Jack blinked, then blinked again. "You're joking." "I'm absolutely not joking," Karen snapped. As per section, she dramatically flipped through the pages of her clipboard, pretending to search for some non-existent rule. Jack could see her eyes darting, desperate to fabricate something that didn't exist. "Let me stop you right there," Jack interrupted. "This is my private property. My pool. Built with my money. You and the HOA have zero say over it." Karen's face twisted as if Jack had just insulted her entire lineage. "That's where you're wrong. As HOA president, I have the authority to enforce community standards, and shared amenities contribute to the neighborhood's overall appeal." Jack let out a laugh, shaking his head. "This isn't an apartment complex. It's my backyard." Karen's lips thinned. "So, you're refusing to cooperate?" "Oh, I'm beyond refusing. I'm telling you to turn around and go harass someone else." For a second, Jack thought she might actually combust on the spot. Instead, she drew herself up, pointing a manicured finger at him. "This isn't over." Jack smirked. "It was over the moment you knocked on my door." Karen stomped off, muttering something about neighborhood unity, but Jack didn't care. He had a pool to enjoy. The peace, however, didn't last long. The next morning, a printed letter was taped to Jack's front door. "Mandatory community pool access discussion at HOA meeting. Attendance required." Jack groaned, crumpling the paper into a ball. He had planned on spending the evening lounging by his pristine, off-limits-to-Karen pool, but now he had to deal with whatever nonsense she was trying to pull. He considered ignoring it, but something told him that would only make things worse. By the time he arrived at the HOA meeting, the atmosphere was already tense. Karen sat at the head of the table, beaming like she had already won. A few other homeowners were present, some looking mildly interested, others clearly just there for the drama. Karen cleared her throat dramatically. "We're here today to address a pressing community issue," she began, glancing at Jack like he was a criminal on trial. "As you all know, a certain homeowner has installed an extravagant pool that unfairly excludes the rest of the neighborhood from its benefits." Jack leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You mean my private pool? On my private property?" Karen ignored him. "The HOA believes it would be in the best interest of the community to implement shared access. We could arrange scheduled swim times, perhaps a sign-up sheet, and of course, a spare key to the gate for emergencies." Jack let out a short laugh. "Let me get this straight. You want me to give a bunch of people, who I don't even know, access to my yard? You want them to come and go as they please? Use my water, my electricity, my furniture? How generous of me." A few people shifted uncomfortably, and Karen's eye twitched. "It wouldn't be coming and going as they please," she argued. "It would be a regulated schedule." Jack stared at her. "You're insane." Karen took a deep breath, as if she were about to launch into some grand legal argument. "This neighborhood is built on community values. Everyone contribute. You're setting a precedent of selfishness." Jack glanced around the room. "Is anyone actually supporting this?" A couple of homeowners avoided eye contact, while one man in the back coughed awkwardly. Karen straightened her shoulders. The decision isn't yours to make alone. Jack leaned forward. Yes, it is. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed Karen's face. She wasn't used to being challenged so directly. But then she forced a smile, the kind that looked more like she was suppressing a scream. We'll take a vote. Jack chuckled. Go ahead. Karen surveyed the room. All in favor of community pool access? Silence. She coughed. All opposed. Nearly everyone raised their hand. Even the people who had been avoiding eye contact. Jack smirked. Looks like democracy's on my side. Karen's face turned a deep shade of red. This isn't over, she hissed, standing up so abruptly her chair screeched against the floor. Jack shrugged. Seems over to me. She stormed out, and Jack took his sweet time leaving, enjoying the petty satisfaction of his victory. But when he got home, the real retaliation began. First, it was the noise complaint. Jack was woken up the next morning by 2 police officers at his door. We got a call about a disturbance, one of them said. Jack frowned. What kind of disturbance? Loud music, shouting, possible fighting. Jack blinked. I live alone. And I was asleep. The officers exchanged glances, clearly recognizing the situation. One of them let out a tired sigh. Look, we've been getting a lot of calls from a concerned neighbor. If there's nothing going on, we'll be on our way. Jack gestured toward his completely silent house. Unless my furniture started hosting wrestling matches, I think we're good. The officers gave him a knowing nod and left. An hour later, a new violation letter appeared in his mailbox. Pool water is too blue. Please correct immediately. Jack stared at the paper, then laughed out loud. Karen was grasping at straws. But she wasn't done yet. The next evening, Jack invited a friend over for drinks by the pool. Just as they were settling into their chairs, sirens blared down the street. 2 police cars and a fire truck screeched to a stop in front of his house. Jack's stomach dropped as uniformed officers rushed into his yard. Sir, we received a report of a drowning, one of them said urgently. Jack stood up, stunned. A what? The officers scanned the pool, which was completely still except for the gentle ripples from the waterfall feature. His friend, sipping a beer, waved at them. No one's drowning, Jack said, exasperated. The lead officer frowned. We got an emergency call. Jack didn't even have to ask who had made it. He turned toward Karen's house, and sure enough, there she was, peeking out from behind her curtains. The officer followed his gaze. Is this a false report? Jack sighed. Oh, absolutely. Karen must have realized she'd been caught because the curtain snapped shut. The officer pinched the bridge of his nose. We'll handle it. Jack watched as they marched toward Karen's house, knocking firmly on her door. He couldn't hear the conversation, but the way Karen's hands flailed in the air made it clear she was trying, and failing, to talk her way out of it. Jack had barely settled into the victory of exposing Karen's false drowning call when he realized something chilling. Karen was the kind of person who never accepted defeat. If anything, being caught only made her more determined. And sure enough, her next move came sooner than expected. The very next morning, Jack woke up to another round of loud knocking. He groaned, already knowing who it was before he even reached the door. Opening it, he was greeted by 2 uniformed police officers, standing stiffly with their hands on their belts. Sir, we received another complaint from a neighbor about excessive noise coming from your property last night, one of them said, his voice monotone, as if he had already done this too many times before. Jack rubbed his temple, exasperated. Let me guess. Loud music, yelling, general chaos. One officer nodded. That would be correct. Jack sighed and stepped aside, motioning toward his backyard. Go ahead. Take a look. If you find anything other than a perfectly quiet pool deck and a few sleepy birds, I'll eat my own flip-flops. The officers exchanged glances before taking a slow walk through his backyard. After a minute, one of them returned, shaking his head. Not a thing out of place. We figured this might be another misunderstanding. Jack scoffed. Misunderstanding is a polite word for it. Karen's just mad she lost. The officer exhaled sharply, clearly holding back an eye roll. We can't stop people from making complaints, but if they continue without reason, we can take action for filing false reports. Jack leaned against his doorframe, grinning. So you're saying if she keeps this up, I can get her in trouble? The officer hesitated but then nodded. If it's harassment, yes. Jack's grin widened. Good to know. The officers left, but the headache wasn't over. The moment Jack stepped back inside, he noticed something new taped to his fridge. He frowned, plucking it off. It was another HOA violation notice. Umbrella color does not match the approved neighborhood palette. Must be changed immediately. Jack stared at the paper, then at his umbrella. A perfectly normal navy blue one. He huffed out a laugh. This was getting pathetic. He crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash. Then came another violation notice. Fence height exceeds HOA guidelines by 1.5 inches. Correct immediately. Jack ran a hand down his face. He had lived in this house for years, and not once had his fence been an issue. But now, suddenly, Karen had an entire catalog of petty complaints. The next one made him laugh out loud. Pool water too reflective. Creates a hazard for passing cars. Jack didn't even know how to process that one. Did she think he could make water less reflective? Was he supposed to sprinkle some anti-glare dust in there? At this point, he was starting to believe Karen stayed up at night brainstorming new ways to torment him. That night, he had just settled into his lounge chair with a beer when he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps on gravel. His security cameras were already on, and he pulled up the live feed on his phone. There she was, Karen, lurking at the edge of his property, holding up her phone like she was collecting evidence for a crime documentary. Jack decided to have some fun. He switched on the automatic pool lights, flooding the backyard in a sudden, eerie blue glow. Then, using his outdoor speaker system, he activated the preset thunderstorm sound effect. The speakers rumbled with deep, rolling thunder, and Karen practically jumped out of her skin. Jack watched as she took off running like she had seen a ghost, tripping slightly on her own flip-flops before disappearing into her house. He burst out laughing. If she wanted to keep escalating things, he was more than happy to play along. The next morning, another officer showed up at his door. Jack was already mid-coffee sip when he opened it, fully expecting yet another ridiculous complaint. Sir, the officer began, rubbing the back of his neck. We received a report of a possible electrical hazard in your backyard. Jack blinked. Let me guess. Karen. The officer looked slightly apologetic. We legally have to check. Jack stepped aside. Be my guest. The officer made a quick round, pausing only to admire Jack's outdoor kitchen setup before shaking his head. Everything's fine. Jack nodded. Yup. The officer sighed. Look, I shouldn't be saying this, but you might want to get a lawyer involved. This is borderline harassment. Jack smiled. Already ahead of you. He had, in fact, already contacted a lawyer, who had laughed for a full minute before agreeing to draft up a cease and desist letter. But before that letter could even be delivered, Karen made her most desperate move yet. Jack had just stepped into his kitchen when he noticed movement through the security camera feed. His stomach dropped. Karen was in his backyard. She had somehow climbed over the fence, her neon-pink Crocs making her stealth attempt utterly useless. Clutched in her hands was a laminated sheet of paper, which she proudly taped to the pool gate. Jack marched outside just as she was admiring her handiwork. Are you out of your mind? He shouted. Karen turned, clearly startled, but quickly regained her composure. I'm implementing a community access schedule. Jack gawked at the sign. Neighborhood pool access schedule. Mondays, families with children. Tuesdays, senior swim. Wednesdays, open swim. Thursdays, HOA president exclusive swim. Fridays, community relaxation night. Saturdays and Sundays, no swim, to respect quiet hours. Jack pointed at the laminated atrocity. What the hell is this? Karen smiled as if she had just solved world hunger. A fair schedule so everyone can enjoy the pool. Jack ripped the paper down and tore it in half. You do not have access to my pool. You never will. Karen gasped like he had just committed a federal offense. You are being completely unreasonable. Jack took a deep breath. Karen, you trespassed onto my property. You climbed my fence. You made a fake schedule. Do you realize how insane that is? Karen's expression darkened. You leave me no choice. Jack raised an eyebrow. Oh, please enlighten me. Karen pulled out her phone. I'm calling 911. Jack snorted. For what? Existing? Karen held up the torn sign like it was a legal document. You destroyed official community property. Jack folded his arms. It wasn't community property. Karen didn't back down. It was laminated. Jack had never wanted to laugh and scream at the same time so badly in his life. Laminate doesn't make something legal, Karen. But she was already speaking into her phone. Yes, officer. I need immediate assistance. There is an aggressive man destroying HOA materials and threatening the peace of the neighborhood. Jack rolled his eyes. Yeah, good luck with that. The sirens arrived faster than expected. The same two officers stepped out, looking absolutely done with life. One of them sighed heavily as he walked up. Ma'am, what's the issue this time? Karen spun dramatically. He's vandalizing community property and refusing to comply with HOA guidelines. The officer glanced at Jack, then at the torn pieces of paper on the ground. He slowly pinched the bridge of his nose. Ma'am, this is a private residence. You are not allowed to make HOA rules about someone else's property. Karen's face turned red. But the community. No, the officer interrupted, clearly out of patience. This is harassment. Step away from the property. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but the officer pulled out a notepad. Ma'am, if I get another report involving you, we will have to escalate this. Jack smirked, watching Karen's eye twitch. She turned on her heel and stomped away, but Jack knew this wasn't over. It was only getting started. Jack knew Karen wasn't done. The way she stormed off, muttering to herself, practically vibrating with unspent rage, told him everything he needed to know. He had won the last battle, but the war was still in full swing. He didn't have to wait long for her next move. The very next morning, Jack was sipping his coffee and scrolling through his phone when he heard a sound that made his stomach drop. His security alarm blared, sending loud, piercing beeps throughout his house. His phone vibrated with a motion alert from his cameras, and as he opened the feed, he nearly choked on his coffee. Karen was back, and this time she wasn't just lurking. She was in his backyard, trying to pry open the pool gate with what looked like a crowbar. Jack shot up from his chair so fast that his knee hit the table. He barely registered the pain as he sprinted outside, his heart pounding with a mix of fury and disbelief. Karen didn't even flinch when she saw him. If anything, she looked almost victorious. You have lost all sense of reality, Jack shouted, marching straight toward her. Do you realize you're literally breaking and entering? Karen scoffed and held up a laminated piece of paper as if it was some sort of legal shield. I have the right, she announced. The HOA bylaws clearly state that community amenities must remain accessible to all residents. Jack's jaw dropped. Are you seriously standing in my backyard, trying to break into my pool, while quoting a rule that doesn't even exist? Karen nodded smugly. You forced my hand. Jack took a deep breath, resisting the urge to grab the paper from her hands and shove it in the pool. Instead, he pointed at the security cameras, which were blinking red, recording everything. You do realize you're being filmed, right? I don't even have to call the cops. They're going to love this. Karen hesitated, glancing up at the camera, her lips twitching as she clearly debated whether or not to continue. Then, in true Karen fashion, she doubled down. "I am the victim here," she declared, stepping back dramatically, clutching her chest as if Jack had just physically shoved her. "You have created a hostile environment in this neighborhood. You have ignored community standards. You have—" Jack held up a hand, cutting her off. "I don't care. Get out of my yard." Karen's face twisted in rage, and then, like a woman possessed, she did the unthinkable. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and dialed 911. Jack stared in disbelief as she put it on speaker. "Hello, 911, what's your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice came through clearly. "Yes, I am being attacked in my own neighborhood," Karen cried, her voice shifting into a theatrical wail. "I am standing near a public pool, and the homeowner is physically threatening me." Jack blinked. "Public pool? Did you just—" He stopped himself because at this point, he was almost curious to see how far she would take this. The dispatcher asked for details, and Karen launched into a completely fabricated sob story about how she was just trying to enforce HOA rules and was being aggressively confronted by a dangerous man. Jack sighed and folded his arms. "You do realize the cops already told you last time that this is private property, right? And that you're literally trespassing while making a false report." Karen ignored him. "Please hurry," she whimpered into the phone. "I don't feel safe." Jack chuckled, shaking his head. "This is going to be good." The sirens came fast, and this time, 3 patrol cars rolled up, along with an officer Jack recognized from the last incident. The man stepped out of his car, took one look at Jack, then at Karen, and let out a sigh so deep it looked like it drained his soul. "Ma'am," the officer started, rubbing his temples, "why are we here again?" Karen spun around dramatically. "I was attacked." The officer raised an eyebrow. "You look perfectly fine." Karen's eyes darted around wildly. "Because I escaped before he could do anything." Jack gestured around them. "With what?" "My pool skimmer." The officer sighed again and turned to Jack. "Do you have footage of what actually happened?" Jack smirked. "Oh, you bet I do." He pulled up the live security feed and hit play. The footage showed Karen creeping into his yard, attempting to pry open the pool gate, and then her entire fake 911 call, word for word. The second the footage ended, the officer's face hardened. "Ma'am, you do realize that making a false emergency call is a criminal offense, right?" Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But he—" "Ma'am," the officer interrupted, "you trespassed onto private property, attempted to damage a locked gate, and filed a false police report. Do you know what that looks like to me?" Karen's eyes widened as realization finally dawned. "I was just trying to do what's right for the community." The officer wasn't buying it. "Turn around, ma'am." Karen gasped, looking around at the neighbors who had come out to watch. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president." One of the other officers stepped forward. "Not anymore," he muttered, glancing at his radio. "We've received multiple complaints from the other residents about harassment and abuse of power. You've been removed." Karen's face went pale. "No. This is my neighborhood. You can't just—" She turned toward Jack, eyes wild with desperation. Tell them I was just trying to enforce the rules." Jack grinned. "Oh, I'll tell them something, all right." He turned to the officer. "I'd like to press charges." Karen screeched so loudly that dogs 3 blocks away probably started barking. The officers didn't wait for her to argue further. Within seconds, her hands were being cuffed behind her back, and she was being led toward the patrol car. "I'll sue you," she shrieked at Jack. "I'll sue all of you. This isn't over. You'll regret this." Jack waved at her as they loaded her into the car. "Have fun explaining this to the judge, Karen." The second the doors shut, the neighborhood erupted in applause. People were clapping, cheering, and even a few neighbors who had always been quiet about their grievances with Karen started high-fiving Jack. Later that night, Jack sat by his pool, enjoying the peaceful silence. No sirens. No complaints. No laminated rule sheets taped to his gate. Just the soothing sounds of water gently rippling under the lights. Then his phone buzzed. A message from his neighbor popped up. "Hey, Karen's husband just posted on Facebook. Looks like they're moving out of the neighborhood." Jack grinned, taking a sip of his drink. The reign of terror was officially over. And best of all, his pool remained gloriously, entirely, and permanently Karen-free.